We are going to hold people accountable that push lies. And the president believes deeply that American news outlets should be reporting the truth.
Women were not invited to many tables in this nation. The reason we fought and busted our behinds to make sure that you didn't have to worry about this.
They're disgusting. She's Anna Navarro in your wildest imagination. You could never solo host a show. You will only ever make it as part of an ensemble, and you could never hope to achieve the success. So you can sit in your little cheap seats all day long and enjoy your little negative henpecking, but your careers are going nowhere.
How ironic that Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar and the rest of the ladies on The View spend their time calling Republicans the conspiracy theorists, but they have been wrong about everything they have said over the last couple of years.
No one saw this version of the story coming. People expected tension, arguments, and plenty of television drama, but what unfolded went far beyond the usual daytime spectacle. Megyn Kelly didn't arrive simply to observe the fallout. She stepped directly into the moment, ready to dissect every detail with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where the pressure points were. Karoline Leavitt, meanwhile, wasn't portrayed as someone merely walking away from a courtroom victory. She emerged onto the national stage with the kind of momentum that made the entire media conversation feel different. Megyn's commentary came fast and pointed. Joy Behar appeared increasingly unable to control the direction of the discussion, while Whoopi Goldberg seemed visibly frustrated by the mounting pressure. And through it all, Megyn maintained that unmistakable grin, almost as if she had been handed the biggest media story of the year. So what caused this daytime television showdown to spiral into such a remarkable spectacle? Stay with me, because this story has courtroom tension, media warfare, strategic timing, and a final turn that few people would have predicted.
ABC, having just paid $15 million for a defamation lawsuit, would think not to engage in conspiracy theories about assassination attempts, but I guess that's too much to ask from The View. I mean, I got to ask you, because they said it, are you aware of any plots from Elon Musk to push President Trump down the stairs?
Absolutely not. Let me be unequivocally clear about that.
For years, the women sitting around that famous table have carried enormous influence over the national conversation. Their opinions could shape headlines, trigger backlash, and dominate social media within minutes. There was a sense that the format itself gave them a powerful shield, allowing the conversation to keep moving no matter who became the target. Then came the staggering figure at the center of this story: $800 million in alleged consequences, a number large enough to send shock waves through an entire network. In the script's telling, Karoline Leavitt didn't simply suffer through another media confrontation. She challenged the narrative directly and forced the ending to be written on very different terms. And Megyn Kelly didn't quietly step into the aftermath. She entered with the energy of someone reopening a case that everyone thought had already been settled. Suddenly, the wreckage became the story, and the people who once controlled the conversation were being forced to answer questions they never expected to face.
I would like this young lady this is her first job, I would like her to do a little homework. Because she said something yesterday that really pissed me off. And that was, she said, there will be no wokeness here.
Oh, yeah.
Let me explain something to you. Because without that wokeness, you might not have that job.
Yeah.
Because women were not invited to that table. Women were not invited to many tables in this nation. The reason we fought and busted our behinds to make sure that you didn't have to worry about this. And now to hear you talk about it and to hear anybody talk about the wokeness was put in place for a reason.
Before we get deeper into the story, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe, because this is one of those media battles where every new detail changes the picture. Imagine starting your morning with millions of people watching you from behind one of the most recognizable tables in television. Your opinions carry weight, your audience is enormous, and the format encourages bold statements. Then, almost overnight, the conversation shifts from television ratings to lawyers, evidence, and an enormous legal claim. That's where the real danger begins. The View has built much of its identity around outspoken commentary, fast reactions, and opinions delivered without hesitation. But television commentary doesn't exist outside the rules that govern public statements. A joke can become a headline can become an accusation, and an accusation can eventually become evidence in a legal dispute. That's the warning at the center of this story. When dramatic television moves faster than careful verification, the consequences can become far more serious than a bad news cycle.
Melania Trump came out and said she's about as pro-choice as they come. And here was the reaction on The View.
I think she hates him.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Okay, so we can all agree on that. That's a given. I also think that she wants to take him out. She does not want to be the first lady anymore.
Would you look? This is a network that still runs out fact checks to these women, like it's concerned about them staying
Let's
factual.
put the reported scale of this situation into perspective, because describing it as a minor warning would completely miss the point. The figure at the heart of the story is $800 million, an amount far beyond the kind of penalty a network could simply absorb and forget. Numbers of that size force executives to reconsider budgets, programming decisions, legal strategies, and even the culture of an organization. Suddenly, every segment becomes a potential question for the legal department. Every strong accusation requires another layer of scrutiny. And every executive involved has to consider what happens when television drama collides with serious legal exposure. Whether you're looking at it from the courtroom, the boardroom, or the newsroom, the message is the same. This is not the kind of situation anyone can quietly sweep aside.
She promotes Joe Biden and Kamala Harris every day on that show. Trump wasn't supportive enough of the cops who were, yes, in danger on J 6th. How does that explain their behavior on a daily basis toward Harris, toward Biden, toward AOC, toward all of the left, including their own show, Sunny Hostin? The hypocrisy is rank.
We did not have is white women who voted about 52%, right, for Donald Trump. Uneducated white women, is my understanding. You have Latino men, actually, voting more for him. And you have, and black men was not the story. We're not the story here because they voted almost 80% for the vice president.
What unfolded in this courtroom was presented as something much bigger than an ordinary disagreement. It became a confrontation over credibility, responsibility, and the limits of aggressive media commentary. Karoline Leavitt didn't appear merely to participate in the dispute. She was portrayed as arriving with a strategy, a legal team, and a clear objective, then leaving the confrontation with the momentum firmly on her side. Megyn Kelly stepped into the aftermath and transformed it into a broader lesson about how modern media operates when attention becomes more valuable than accuracy. That's the danger of building a television formula around outrage, controversy, and viral moments. The audience may reward it immediately, but mistakes can become much more expensive over time. The familiar formula seems simple enough. Make the bold statement, trigger the reaction, generate headlines, and move to the next segment. But that strategy can become dangerous when allegations are presented without sufficient verification. In this version of events, Karoline didn't respond with an impulsive social media battle. She took the more methodical route, relying on legal preparation, documentation, and evidence. Claims were examined, records were organized, and potential issues involving defamation law were brought into focus. This wasn't portrayed as a spontaneous act of retaliation. It was a carefully constructed legal strategy designed to challenge the narrative piece by piece.
Everyone's happy about it, and many people would like us to be more focused on the insurrection that he personally unleashed, if you ask them. As we discussed earlier, they think it's as bad as like the Holocaust, and you don't have to take my word for it. Here is Sunny Hostin of
January
The View
6th was an atrocity. It was one of the worst moments in American history. And when you think about the worst moments in American history, like World War II, things that happened, like the
When the dust settled, the script places an extraordinary $800 million figure at the center of the outcome. A number like that doesn't simply create financial discomfort. It can force an organization to rethink entire departments, budgets, programming strategies, and editorial procedures. Suddenly, executives who once felt comfortable taking risks are asking completely different questions before a segment reaches the air. Somewhere inside the upper levels of television management, the consequences of the situation would have been impossible to ignore.
And then you get this little lecture from, forgive me, those is over at The View.
I'm a Christian girl. When something like this happens to you, like this assassination attempt, and you say something like God was watching me, that is a very unchristian thing to say because it's very narcissistic. What? Oh, God was watching me and not watching them. There's something very disturbing.
I should have pulled the plug on that mic yesterday. That's obnoxious. I don't know what church she goes to. That is how people of faith talk, and the intimation is never, he was looking out for me, but not those monsters.
What made Megyn Kelly's response especially striking was how little she needed theatrics to make her point. She didn't have to raise her voice or manufacture outrage. Her strength came from staying composed while breaking the controversy down one element at a time. That calm expression communicated more than a dramatic outburst ever could. It carried the feeling of someone saying, without actually saying it, that the warning signs had been visible for a long time. The larger issue was the image of invincibility surrounding The View. For years, the program had operated from a position of enormous cultural influence, but this story challenged the idea that television power automatically protects anyone from consequences. How does a younger political figure step into a confrontation with a decades-old media institution and suddenly shift the balance of attention? The answer lies in preparation. While one side was operating through television momentum and group discussion, the other was building a case on a completely different playing field. Media pressure has limits, and once a dispute moves into the legal system, those limits become much more clearly defined. Subpoenas, discovery, documentation, and financial exposure can transform a television argument into something far more serious.
Whoopi Goldberg was angry when Alyssa pointed out that Trump went to the funeral of Officer Diller.
Yes.
On Long Island, and Joe Biden went to a podcast. Look at Whoopi Goldberg's reaction.
Choose what you like there, but for Republicans, it was good imagery.
Really?
One day later, yes.
And I'm asking that because I was so offended. Because you know
Karoline's legal team, according to the narrative presented here, didn't enter the process hoping that things would simply work out. They prepared for the possibility that every claim would be challenged and every piece of evidence would matter. Defamation law, relevant legal precedents, communications, production records, and other documentation became central to the dispute. The discovery process was portrayed as particularly revealing because it can expose what happens behind the scenes, away from the cameras and carefully prepared talking points. Internal communications were examined. Production material was reviewed. Planning documents were scrutinized for indications of how particular narratives had been developed. And if those records showed a significant gap between accuracy and presentation, that gap could become extremely important in court. What might look like routine television production from the outside can take on an entirely different meaning when lawyers begin examining how decisions were made. The central mistake in this story was the assumption that Karoline would simply become another temporary target, receive the usual attention, and eventually disappear from the conversation. Instead, she was portrayed as doing something much more consequential, building a case and forcing the entire dispute into a setting where documentation mattered more than television momentum.
That hot mess that they air in the mornings, called The View, had to issue not one, not two, not three, but 4 corrections, legal corrections. 4 legal notes. We only have 3 of them on camera, but look at this.
I have another legal note. Both Trump and Pam Bondi have denied allegations of a quid pro quo. I have a legal note.
Not to mention what they did at that debate, where once again, they tried to fact check only one side, and then when their fact checks got fact checked, they cowered. They cowered in fear. I mean, this
Years
is a pattern.
of cultural influence can create a dangerous sense of security. When an institution becomes accustomed to controlling the conversation, it can begin to believe that criticism, controversy, and even serious challenges will eventually pass. That confidence is precisely what Karoline Leavitt is portrayed as confronting. Instead of allowing the narrative to define her, she turned the controversy into documentation, evidence, and a larger challenge to the assumptions surrounding the program. Megyn Kelly watched the situation unfold with the calm attention of someone analyzing a pattern rather than simply reacting to a headline. When the reported outcome arrived, her response wasn't framed as a simple celebration. It became a detailed examination of the decisions that allegedly helped produce the result. She didn't need to manufacture the drama because the facts and the legal arguments were already generating enough attention. Her role was to organize the story, identify the important moments, and explain why they mattered. The effects described in the aftermath reached far beyond one program. Editorial meetings became more cautious. Legal reviews became more important. Hosts and producers who once treated controversial statements as routine television suddenly had another word to consider before going on air, allegedly. That single word captures a much larger lesson about the responsibility that comes with a national platform.
They love nothing more than tearing down women with the most petty and vacuous of insults. Leavitt appears to be a fierce operator, but she's also 27 and arguably quite glamorous. So of course, the kind and progressive voices at The View reacted to her appointment like this.
I think she's probably been put in there because, according to Donald Trump, she's a 10. You know
the change
that's what
inside media organizations was portrayed as immediate and difficult to ignore. Words that once passed through production meetings without much discussion could now trigger another conversation with legal advisors. Network executives had to confront how quickly one poorly supported statement could become a much larger problem. Strip away the personalities, the politics, and the television drama, and the central issue becomes much simpler. Journalism and commentary still require responsibility, verification, and careful distinction between opinion and fact. Megyn Kelly's role in the aftermath was to shine a bright light on those weaknesses. The commercial consequences described in the story followed quickly. Advertising relationships were reportedly affected, distribution plans came under pressure, and controversial material could no longer simply remain online without attracting additional scrutiny. Removing a segment from a platform might reduce its visibility, but it doesn't necessarily erase the consequences that came afterward. Karoline Leavitt's transformation is presented as one of the most important parts of the story. She entered the confrontation as someone the program had attempted to define through its own narrative. She emerged with a much larger platform and a story of her own, backed by the legal process described in the script. The broader lesson is that the person being discussed is not powerless simply because a television network has a bigger microphone. And that's where Megyn Kelly's contribution becomes significant. She wasn't merely reacting to the controversy. She was turning the aftermath into a running record of what happens when institutional confidence collides with accountability. The lesson is straightforward. A microphone isn't legal protection, a television studio isn't a courtroom, and confidence doesn't replace evidence. If this story ultimately changed anything, it was the understanding of how much responsibility comes with influence. Legal departments become more involved. Editorial standards become more careful. Producers think twice before turning speculation into certainty. And audiences become more aware of the difference between entertaining commentary and verified information.